are my best. All right, thank you so much for coming on my channel.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Seriously.
Yes, it's a good time. I love spending time with the family. And as time goes on, we'll introduce the kids also for you to. They have a lovely kids. Trust me, you'll fall in love with them. It is so amazing to see the kids. So, first of all, can you just introduce yourself to my people?
Sure. So to Nii's people, we want to say thank you so much to Brother Nii for this opportunity. It's amazing, and also what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. So thank you. My name is Abena Richardson, wife of
Michael Richardson. So Michael Ecole Richardson.
Wow. Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned your African name. You know, there are a lot of people out there that normally don't use their African name.
Yeah.
They use their first name as whatever. I just don't want to go there, but I really
no,
love that.
definitely. You know, fortunately for me,
I told you my commander wants to see you.
I said I'm coming.
You cannot wait for you. You know why he's calling you?
I don't know as I'm coming.
I told you, I stood here,
Oh,
I
please.
called you. You
The
didn't
thing
mind.
is, no, I was coming.
Uncle,
Please,
patience. Don't
please.
be angry.
Please, I'm coming.
Uncle
Please.
Nyabuche,
I
why?
cannot be waiting for you.
I know. We will be coming there to go up too. So I'll be there.
You don't know why.
Should we start from the top?
How long have you been in Ghana so far?
So far, we've been here for about a year and a half, and just loving it. A year and a half. I say we've been here for a year and a half, but we've been planning to come here for about 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, for about 4 years. So from about, we'll say 2016.
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah, we've been coming and going, because coming over is not something that you do just like that. Yeah. So we've been.
I was about to ask, how was the planning? How difficult was it?
Hey, the planning was, it was years in the making. So it started off from way back. I think when Abena and I first met, we shared a common journey where we both grew up, were both born in the UK, spent a few years in Ghana, Abena up until 9, me up until about 6, 7, and then we went back to the UK. And we've been back in the UK ever since. So when we got married, when we met, we got married and we moved, we said, you know what, we would love for the children to spend time in Ghana, as we did, because we have lovely, fond memories. And then, you know, fast forward a bit, we said, okay, well, maybe a year, maybe 2. But as time's gone on, we said, you know, why should it just be 2 years? And then the planning started coming to be like, hey, you know what, how are we going to make this happen? And, you know, what is that journey going to look like? You know, we're going to have to sacrifice something. And what are those things going to be? And literally, that's where the planning started. And it started with phone calls, you know, making sure you're speaking to family, you know what's happening in Ghana. Then the trips, then just advice. Anybody who had advice about doing it, we'll ask and we'll start to jot down, we'll make notes and we'll plan. So there were stages to it. And as we got nearer and nearer, then the trips and the holidays, the frequency and so on. So it was, to a certain extent, a military operation, but it started a very simple thing of we wanted to do it. And then the steps on how we got there in the end.
Interesting. You know, you want to ask something?
Oh, now I'm just listening.
I wanted to ask, what really triggered the moving in to settle finally? Something might have triggered that thing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Nii. Funnily enough, we had 2 different perceptions of why we wanted to come. Michael always wanted to come to Ghana. Even from the time we met and we were courting, he made it very clear that one day we are not staying in Babylon for the rest of our lives. He made it very clear. For me, I was seeing a lot of aunties and uncles who had always wanted to come back. So let's say first generation wanted to come back, and they would always leave it till it was too late. But because I was younger at the time, I'd say like in my 20s, that time was a very far distance for me. I was settled, I had a business in the UK that was doing fairly well. And yeah, so for me it was like, you know, Ghana can wait. And of course you'd always hear about the corruption, how hard things are and so on and so forth. So I had this very kind of backward, you could call it ignorant mindset about what it takes to come home and the enjoyment of what you would experience if you came home. Then moving fast forward, we had children. And when the children came, that's when I realized that everybody cried about the same thing. We were all still second-class citizens in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to leave all this to come to Ghana.
Oh, yeah. I mean, second-class citizens in that when you're black, there are things that don't come as easily to you. Even our parents are always like, if if you're a black person in this country, make sure you work 10 times as hard as the white man. Yeah. So subconsciously, you always knew that you have to work 10 times as hard. You don't see pictures of people that look like you. The role models do not look like you, and everything is just twice as hard. The prejudices, the racism, the undertone lines of racism.
Yeah.
And you just think to yourself,
just to touch on that a bit. So I remember there was a story about a guy called Stephen Lawrence, a young boy who got killed in a part of southeast London, and he was murdered by some racist boys at the time. But what happened was his parents really pushed, and they really pushed to find out what happened. And in the end, they found out it was an institutionalized system with the whole of the police force. And they fought for it, and that was one of the first landmarks where people actually realized that the police as an institution are institutionally racist. And that maybe you may not have had negative associations with the police, but many did. And whether you like it or not, you may not have experienced it, but it could come to your door at any time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just touching on that.
No, that's a really good point. And of course, our first child was a boy. So for him to experience that kind of lifestyle where you can be out and the police would see you, there's something they have called stop and search, where they could stop and search you a hair. You've heard about it. And to experience that level of inferiority, that level of victimization. People talk about Ghana not being perfect, but it's far from perfect for us in the UK. And they say home is where the heart is. If you're living in a place that's not your home, it's not your home. You're always compromised to an extent. So then we had to make a decision. And going back to the trigger that you were talking about, the trigger really was, do we sit and experience this day in, day out, complain, not do anything about it, and that's the example we're setting to our children? Or do we stop the complaining, come back home and try and better what we can in our homes and leave something for them as a legacy to stand on? And that was really the foundation of why we came home.
Wow. So how many kids do you have now?
So we have 3. Yeah, we have 3. We have an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
So we have Adansi. Asida comes first.
And
Inshira, then Adansi.
Yeah.
Wow. I I'm so much in love with African names.
Yeah.
So hearing their name being in the local dialect, I feel so proud because names are one of the things that you are easily identifying and people get to know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. As a people, we found back home, many of us have an identity crisis. And we don't realize that when you give something a name, it identifies them from the very beginning. So for us, it was a case of when we came to name our children, do we give them a name that's foreign to their ancestors and compromise them? Because when you give them a foreign name, by default, you're telling them that there's a part of them that you're not quite accepting as them. So you're giving them half of who they are. So yeah, I didn't have an English name, and growing up in the UK, many of my friends did. But then as I grew up, I realized I'm not English. So why would I have an English name? An Englishman is an Englishman. So that's why he gives his children English names, as well as the Greeks, the French, and everything else. So by default, our children should have their names. They should speak their languages. Everything that they are belongs to them, and it's theirs for the taking. So their names, we were never going to compromise.
Wow. As a father, how much important is it for you to name your children with the correct African name?
I mean, just as Amina said it, we actually had an interesting story of how we came about the names. And for me, my surname is Richardson, or our surname is Richardson. And I always said to myself, you know what? I'm raising my children to do great things. And when they do, or if they do, when they do, and they have their name on a plaque somewhere, or they receive an award, wherever it's etched, I want somebody to look at that and say, straight away, looking at the name alone, they are Ghanaian.
Wow.
And for me, that was the main driving force. I want them to know that wherever they go, whether we move to Japan, the US, anywhere in the world, your name is a Ghanaian name, and may you never forget that. So that was really the key driver for me.
Oh, they will live to cherish this. But how difficult was it for them? Did it have any effect on them when you decided to move back to Ghana?
Moving back,
the children.
Hey, you know what? one thing I say is, it was purposeful. What we've done with our children is purposeful. From from giving them their names to teaching them their mother tongue, for us making it the main language in our house, to even down to disciplining the children. I always say, you know what, we're going to admonish you and lift you up in Chi.
Oh,
and
wow.
then when it's time for you to get your discipline, we'll give it to you in English, because we wanted the children to be purposeful, to know that, hey, Charlie, we laugh and we enjoy our mother tongue. And you know what, when it's time to tell you off, we're going to tell you off in English.
You know, I was coming there before we come back to Ghana on the kids. I was so amazed. How were you able to do it? Though they were not born in Ghana, right? But they can still speak the local dialect, to the extent that they even speak Ga aside Chi.
Yeah.
How were you able to do it?
This one. Okay,
I
mean, I'll quickly run through my story. So me, I didn't speak Chi when I was younger.
Okay.
Originally Fanti, but I could only speak very basic, simple, house words. But as I met Abina, and I remember she could speak Chi very well, because she always spoke it with her mother in the house. And I remember I said to her, you know what, you need to keep speaking that Chi. And I need to learn, because I need the children to be able to speak and know who they are. So fast forward, when the children came, I said, before, when the first one was on the way, I said, you know what, we must speak Chi as a first language in the house. And at that time, I couldn't speak Chi properly. So I'm like, hey, I need to do something about it. So I went to a Chi school, learned everything I could, really pushed myself to do so. And when the time came, it just became a natural thing in the house. So because Chi was the first language, that was it. We had post-it notes on all the furniture in the house, so that they could see the spelling, they know how to pronounce it. I created resources for the children so that they could see other children their age dancing, singing wutik, wabeti, kotoji, nanswa, so that from a very young age they would love the language and want to speak it. We always had fun in it. We would laugh, we would joke, we would tell Anansi Sem, everything. And once you do that, you don't need to do much else. The children just enjoy it, and it just becomes part of them. So we were very intentional and purposeful about it.
Now you want to add something?
I did want to add something. So I think because he was handicapped or disabled in the sense that he wasn't able to speak the language, we then realized that when you're courting, even before the children come, it's really important to be very intentional about having children, and even how you're going to raise them, how you're going to discipline them, and all sorts. Because what you have to realize is that it's two families coming together, two different ancestors whose blood is still, their DNA is running through those children. So we owe it to them to really instill what is intrinsic to our culture. And what's intrinsic is our method and our level of communication. And it's not just the language, it's everything in and around the way that we communicate, the heritage, the traditions, everything about that. So when Michael decided that we should teach the children how to speak Chi, at the time I couldn't read and I couldn't write. But what I realized that when you speak a language in the West, it's not enough to just say you speak the language. You have to hear it, you have to read it, you have to understand exactly. So then he started to get me books to be able to write and read, and I started on this journey with the children. And then I started to learn the etymology of certain words. So when you have a word like akwaba, akwa is a messenger or a slave. So you send them away, akwa.
That is akwa.
So you send them to get the message, and you send that they've come back. So akwano wako and so akwaba. And then the children really start to hear these kinds of words like memawachi, the day has has risen, majo, the day has gone, it's gone quieter. So everything is explanatory. When you say evening in the English language, it doesn't mean anything. It just means evening.
But this one, they get to know the story, the reason, and understand it.
Exactly. I feel like eating something. Mikondo, my neck loves. It's just That's
interesting.
So all of that is there in the language, and you think, wow, even me as an adult, I'm relearning something about myself and who I am. And then it comes to the writing. So all of these things, you realize that it's making you complete.
Wow.
So back to your question about bringing them here, because that was instilled in them from a very early age, they learn to take pride and have value in who they are.
They're already yearning to come home.
Exactly. And that pride and value was superimposed over anything else that was next to them. Should I wait for this? Bye-bye, yo.
You know, when we're kids, when we see this, we wave at it and we tell the plane that when you're coming, buy me biscuit, buy me toffee.
We are in the shopping list.
We are in the shopping list, yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, so so they take a lot of pride and value in who they are. Whereas the way that most of us raise our children, we raise them with a lot of English, so English books, English cartoons, English. But we were very intentional that we found Tree cartoons, we found Tree books. If we were reading them a book in English, we will read them the book in English, like the page in English, and then we will translate it in the Tree. So they would understand both. So they already knew. They had a sense of belonging. They didn't need to validate themselves with anyone.
A lot of questions are coming through my mind. But before I come back to you, Mike, you were telling me about how you were able to compose Chi language in CDs. Can you touch on that?
Okay, so what happened again, ACCRA was born, and just as we did, so we used to teach the children French, a bit of Spanish and Portuguese and other languages. And when you go online and you look for books and resources, hey, the European languages, they're a dime a dozen. You can pick whichever you want. But then I looked for Chi and all I could find was old textbooks. And I'm like, my 6-month-old isn't going to want to learn and read a textbook. So I wanted to create resources for him so that he could look at it, see people who look like him and say, oh, you know what, they're speaking Chi. And not only are they speaking Chi, they're having fun doing it. So just like the way they watch cartoons and other things, he'll be learning his language whilst having fun. So I remember at the time I was there using flashcards, then we'll be using little cartoon things here and there. And I remember I did it all for him, and Vanessa looked at me and said, you've gone through all this trouble to make sure these resources are here so ACCRA can speak Chi. Why don't you just spend a bit more time and make it available to the world and anyone else who may be wanting to teach their child Chi. So
if someone wants like a copy or something, how do they get in touch?
So it's called Listen, Speak and Learn. We have volume 1 and volume 2, which is the absolute basic from beginner, and just teaching them some of the basics of the language, and they can get it through our website, thedestinationafrica.com.
Okay, so I'm now back to you.
Okay.
I love language a lot, and one of the things that I focus most on is that if you lose your language, you've lost yourself.
Absolutely.
So I have a channel, I teach Ghana.
Yeah.
So I'm much interested when it comes to languages.
Right.
How important is it for parents in the diaspora to teach their children their local language?
You know, it's everything. I don't even like the term local language because it makes it sound like you have something around the corner.
It's called it a mother tongue.
Exactly. There's a reason why they call it your mother tongue, and that's because it's something you should know from when you're in the womb. You know, if it's something that your mother's mother spoke, it's something that should be part of that umbilical attachment. So it's really funny. There's different energies around languages as well. Different energies, different vibrations. And if our children don't have that from the very beginning, like you say, they lose a part of themselves completely, and they're walking in the world trying to navigate who they are. That's why it's so easy for people to validate who we are, because we don't know who we are. And people are telling you, oh, this is who you were. The history then comes into it. You know, the culture comes into it. Your heritage comes into it. And if it's yours to inherit, why are we not giving it to our children? By the time our children were 2 years old, they were completely bilingual.
Wow.
And this is what amazes me about children, which even us as adults, we couldn't even figure out. Children compartmentalize things in their minds where they would see somebody, it doesn't matter whether they were black, whether they were white, whether they were Chinese. And I don't know what it is, because at that time they couldn't really express what it was to us. But what we did see the evidence of was that
we go make up. When is a